amendment to what you have previously put on the table as a motion.
Okay.
I think they're two separate items.
How about we hold off on the minutes until we get this, what goes in the minutes straight out first? Is that acceptable? We not change the minutes yet, we postpone them until the next meeting until we decide what we need to see in the minutes.
I think is that something that you can do?
You have a motion and a second on to approve the minutes now.
Motion, and we'll have to withdraw the second to start over.
Okay, well, I withdraw my motion.
Second, okay, now we're back to square one. What do you want to do with the minutes? Do you want to postpone the minutes until we figure out what we're going to ask for in the minutes, or do you want to accept these and then move forward?
I guess I'd like to have them reflect what we really want.
I would too. Anybody else have any comments?
Well, again, out of respect for the citizens that take their time to come here and talk to us, I think those minutes fail.
Okay,
And we need to come to terms with that, because that's a very important, public input is very important to any government body. Doesn't matter whether we're council or not. So we should respect the fact that these people have come before us and expressed their feelings and their desires about how we run things. And if that is not reflected somewhere, if it's reflected outside of the meetings, then it's false. Because that's a secondary matter, we'll find. The minutes should reflect what the citizens have come to say, and do not summarize it into a yes or no for the sake of efficiency. There are some things in the government that are just not efficient. And record keeping is one of those, especially when it's testimony from the citizenship. So that is my feeling on that. And we should not accept anything less than that.
I don't know who was next, I got both your lights on, so. Somebody care to make a motion?
I make a motion that we not accept the minutes, and I'll move to the next meeting, at which time we'll have some idea what we want those minutes to reflect. Is that what we're at?
Wow.
I'm very clear on what I think we should reflect. I just spoke to that. If a citizen goes up and speaks, we should record it, make it part of what happened that day, that time, for the record.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a second, so.
So, no,
Would you like to make the motion and?
So I would like to make a motion that we do bookkeep whatever is said.
Okay, I thought we needed to do something with these minutes first, though.
You gotta do something with this minutes.
We gotta do something with the minutes.
And it's either accept or reject.
So reject until the next meeting, we'll discuss again after we get clarification on what we want. Is that not what? Make your motion, I can't, so.
But there's a first motion right now to reject the minutes and table to the next meeting. That sounds like what it's not.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
just
motion to
for
table.
further discussion. So I haven't heard a second though.
Right,
Correct.
Okay.
A second.
for discussion. Okay, so now we have a second to table.
You want discussion?
Yes, please.
Will this make difficulties in trying to get the minutes done by, having them going and redo them? She says they're taped.
Right.
So I guess that means next meeting, we'll have to read the whole, whatever they come out to be. Is that the technical difficulty of trying to do that? That is something we need to address, whether there's a difficulty of doing that.
Is that a question to Stan?
I'm asking, yeah, staff.
So are you asking?
If we reject these and you go and talk to somebody, clerk, and he says, okay, go ahead and take the tape recording and run it through a word processor which then turns into text,
I
which
see.
then we get.
I-
I don't know if that's a technical problem or something that you can do or not do. That's what I'm asking is, yes, I agree that we have a problem, but is it something we can actually solve or not?
I heard a motion to table this item for further discussion at your next meeting. I have not heard a motion or
No,
anything
did
part
you
of the
table
motion
it?
to revise these minutes or to do any further action beyond this tabling to your next meeting.
Does that need to be included in the
Yes.
motion?
You have there's a motion and a second on the table right now to table these minutes for further discussion.
You have the opportunity now in this motion to table it, then this is done, we go on to the next agenda item.
No, I was discussing something you were tabling. Okay, I was out of order.
Well, you have a second.
No, I thought he had a second.
Mr. Delgado has a second.
Sorry.
But I mean, it does bring up a good point, and forgive me, you know, if I'm just not on it, okay? But it sounds like I could also make this motion to include a request to have a verbatim transcription. Am I hearing that right?
You can make that request, sir. I can tell you right now, our answer is probably not gonna be, we can provide anything like that. And the reason is because the last time we provided a verbatim was for a 10-minute segment of a meeting that we needed in order just so we understood what was discussed, because we didn't understand even when we heard what was being discussed. So we wanted to read it. That took 2 hours just to do those 10 minutes. We don't have the staff, time, or resources to do it verbatim.
You think that the technology would be there? I mean, you've got Siri and you've got all these things that transcribe into text what you say into them. I mean, I could understand in my day, we had to pay, you know, people to actually do that, and it would take like a week or so to get them back. So, gosh, it sounds like we're back to, rejecting the minutes and waiting until,
We need something from the citizenry in the minutes, not
Yeah.
just a name and an ad. I even question why we need an address. You know, I mean, to put somebody's address out there in the public, for what purpose? Right now, it appears to be no purpose. There's nothing recorded in the minutes that the citizens said, and I find that to be a fault. So I would not be voting to approve these minutes because to me, they're incomplete. And that's sufficient. Now, if they can put more in, maybe they can do a verbatim copy of just citizenry when they come up and talk, but at least that should be recorded. Maybe it doesn't need to be verbatim, but it certainly needs to be recorded with more than just they came up and spoke.
well, you know, in some cases, citizens do provide us with a text copy of what they present. So why can't that be included?
Attachment should be included, I would think, in the minutes.
Handouts that are provided to you at your meeting are always attached to the meeting as part of the public record.
The ones that are handed out during the meeting,
Yes.
we're still at an impasse. Unless we want to make a vote on this to, okay, see another line. It's Liz.
Is it just possible to bring us back to where we were before, where we had a sentence or two of what the person discussed, so that we could then reference back to the audio if we needed to? Because you mentioned that everything is audio taped, but if we don't know what our constituent was speaking about, we don't even know where to go look for it.
So we can go back and ask for more guidance from the clerk's office to see how we can address that. Just so you know that the reason why the minutes are the way they are is because there was more information in there, and there was always a debate as to whether that really reflected what was said. Because these are a minutes is primarily supposed to be a summary of what's discussed, not a verbatim, unless that's absolutely necessary. So we can go back and ask for more guidance and come back to you with it. So currently you have a motion to continue this at your next meeting, but we can provide that information in response from the clerk's office at your next meeting as well.
I've got one in, I'm waiting.
Yeah, because I do remember when Mr. Klein came up, and I do remember Mr. Klein was very, to the point of what he was proposing to do. And towards the end, Mr. Klein, in my recollection, did say that he was all for it and that he wanted our support. So, in my mind, that negated the statement that says he was neither for or against. And that is where I have a problem with. We had a presenter that presented data, that presented facts, that presented process to go do something. And so therefore, the statement that was made on the minutes that we're reading tonight says that he was neither for or against.
Can you tell me which page we're on? Because I'm looking at one paragraph where he, or one statement where he came up and spoke on page 5 of the minutes. That's page 2 of the minutes, page 5 of your packet.
Page 3.
So,
Can I chime in for just a second?
please.
When they sign these cards, they tell me whether or not they're for or against.
Okay.
So it says for, against, neither. They have to check that on their speaking cards. They sign it.
So
That's where that comes from.
Thank you.
So perhaps.
And a couple speaking cards did come in, I believe, maybe for this item.
Mhm.
So I don't know if
Yes.
They're gonna call public.
Can I ask, how long was these tapes held? Do you keep them for a year or a month or what?
That's a good question for records retention. I can certainly ask the clerk's office, but I know we have records that go back many years with recordings and video when they're available.
Wow, where do you keep 100-year-old towns' records?
So before even recording of these meetings, there were minutes that were taken that go back several decades in our archives.
Well, we have a motion and a second, motion to table to the next meeting. I gather you understand why.
Yes, we understand, but I guess I'm asking, are you asking us for direction to go speak with the clerk's office or some other direction?
Well, I could say that I didn't make the motion, so I don't know. I mean, to me, I would say yes. I would like to know what the clerk's gonna have to say, because we find, I believe unanimously, it seems, that these minutes are inadequate.
We can do that. We can go back to your next meeting, with this being tabled to your next meeting to discuss, to bring you some information.
Yeah, you know, Brad, we have a job to do, or at least we take it seriously. And getting this kind of feedback is just, you know, inadequate. You know, I don't wanna say disrespectful, but to the citizenry, but basically, you know, I mean, they're going to lengths to come here to give their statements and input, you know. We don't have anything to show for it.
Yeah, right.
Never know how did you have a.
May I ask, going back to what just was said about the citizens marking yes or no on the form, can we please go back to Mr. Klein's form that was put, that was made in the last meeting, see if he did sign yes or no on whether he agreed or not? Is that possible?
Lori can certainly look back to see the form that he signed, see what he indicated on that particular item, agenda item, when he spoke, to confirm whether the information we see in the minutes is correct. So that sounds like an amendment to the minutes that you're suggesting for us to clarify.
Well, it's a question first to find out whether it was done or not, since apparently the determining factor for staff to determine whether they were for or against is checking that box on that piece of paper,
Yes.
right?
That's
Am I
what,
wrong?
that's what Ms. Darby said.
Okay, so therefore, if that's a determining factor, then what I'm asking is if it's possible to go check Mr. Klein's petition to address the council last time. Okay, and.
His
see-
petition to address council.
Well, to address the board.
Okay.
I'm sorry, to address the board last time, and make sure that he did it or not. Because that is apparently what causes that statement that is on the minutes to be made. That's how it comes. That is the procedure.
I understand. Then if that sounds like you're asking for a correction to the minutes, So I would recommend that you make a motion amending the original, on top of the original motion, that says that, asking staff to go back to the record and forms to verify whether the speaker was for or against, and make sure that's reflected accurately in the minutes. So, and then if both motions are approved, this will be continued to your next meeting with revised minutes if necessary, and then you continue the discussion with our, also additional information we'll get from the clerk's office.
I may be missing something here, but I'm not sure what that's gonna get us. It's not gonna give us what they really said, for or against. Who cares? I wanna know
Yeah.
the details.
Yeah.
Okay, so that
I understand.
doesn't,
What I'm trying to figure out is what is the trigger mechanism for staff to determine what they determine as it.
That's what they put in the card.
There is yes or no.
that's what they check on the card.
They check the card. So now you have an administrative procedure that needs to be dealt with. Otherwise, staff can go and say, they never checked it. And you know what, it doesn't matter what we agreed, going back to staff, with, now you've gotta put into the minutes every word that is said, creates conflict. And then administratively, we would get caught in we don't have the resources. Then what?
Well, if I might make a suggestion, Member Delgado, since that's an issue to potentially modify the minutes, why don't we, until the next meeting, table them if the staff has the ability to update them or add additional information to clarify the missing pieces, then you guys can discuss, additional changes then. Right now, it's pretty clear to me that the minutes as they are incomplete and as such need to be revised and moved on for the next meeting until they can be. That's my take on this.
Speaker cards.
The problem I have with that, Mike, is I'm not so sure the answer that we're gonna get is gonna be what we're looking for. Which is to record, not record, is record. But the minutes to display the dialogue that took place.
There should be at least a summary of the dialogue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what Eddie, Brad is going to take to the clerk, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, again, since there is a procedural box that needs to be checked in order to get the minutes to be written, if the box was left out last time, okay, was that the determining factor on what determination was made not to put the content of what Mr. Klein said?
No.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Wow.
I think they just agreed to not put the content in of individual speakers. None of them had content.
So, had he checked the box yes, then you would have been in.
He still would have had his content added to the minutes.
Okay. It cannot be both ways. The minutes reflect the fact that Mr. Klein spoke on a subject, but it was determined that he neither was in favor or against. That is what the minutes reflect right now. Okay? Verbatim. And so therefore, if that is what the position is, that's different. That's totally different, because if he had checked the box, then the minutes, that would have initiated a different procedure, in my opinion, from staff that said, we need to put the content in.
I don't believe it would have made a difference, but Brad, please. I mean, it's just a checkbox. It doesn't make a difference what they put in the minutes.
Again, sir, the minutes, the intent of them is to provide an essence of the report, of the activities that happened at the meeting. It's not supposed to be a verbatim. We could speak with the clerk's office about whether we need to, what kind of guidance we can get as far as providing more summary.
Well, clearly the essence of what the individual speaker spoke is not there.
Well, sir, if we provide more information here, I think you'll still be debating about how we provide that information, even those summaries. And I think what we're trying to do is to say that this action happened. Mr. Klein gave us a card. He indicated he wasn't speaking for or against a particular item. We indicated on the minutes. He came and spoke, and we also put down where he's from. We didn't put any more information in that, because it's the guidance we got from the city council, from the city clerk's office. If we need to provide more information, if that's what your question, we'll certainly explore that with the city clerk's office and get some guidance. But I think you're gonna have this debate even if we have more information in here. Just to remind you that the recording is basically the verbatim. So if you need to find out what someone specifically said at the meeting, you can follow along in the order when people spoke, and you can hear that in the recording. That's what we do. We always go back and listen to the meeting to find out what was said.
Yeah, that's great, but it doesn't really lend itself to us doing the job up here, you know, unless we're constantly referring to a recording. And I think that's why all the other commissions have, you know, the ability to have not only a better minute, I don't suspect, you know, adding a summary at least of what somebody brings to us would be at issue. But up here, you know, we're trying to approve minutes, we're quickly looking through, okay, what was that? We need to be able to reflect on something rather than having to think, oh gee whiz, you know, what was it that was said at that minute? And that also means us having to revisit all that audio, you know.
Can I ask, the form, does that give a topic? Or just, that form gives a topic of what they're,
Yes.
it says the topic?
They sign in what agenda item they're going to talk on.
Right. Any other discussion before we call the cards? Well, we have people that now have signed up for this.
Yeah.
So, let's call the card.
Kristen Bodie.
Oh, sorry, I didn't press
There you go.
one. Okay, for this meeting, you'll have 5 minutes, right?
Right.
It's
For
been,
petitions and requests, we gave 5.
oh, for 5 petitions, okay, for the
As
site.
far as I know.
Okay. I'm gonna try to speak really quickly then. I have done a review of the minutes, and so I want to provide some more detailed feedback on my observations. And as far as the motion to go to the clerk's office, I can appreciate that staff is willing to do that. What I wrote down is perhaps request the motion to amend the draft and add more detail, including summaries. You know, so that the motion is precise. And instead, it's going to land in the clerk's office, and if it is the way it is, so be it. But I would like to tell you what I found in the minutes. So I found 7 instances of the neither for nor against in the minutes. And as far as the card that we just learned about the card, at the time that a speaker submits a card, we don't always know how we feel because we're saying that we want to speak on this topic. You guys might have a robust discussion on it, and so I'm not sure if I'm for or against. At the moment, I'm for the tabling of the minutes, and I'm against the approval of the minutes, right? But it's a more nuanced, so it's not so easy as just to check the box to know. Now, if we know that, we can try to be more precise about it. In looking at the minutes, I noticed that your first names are all absent from the minutes. The residents who spoke are street addresses in there, where I agree with the comment that said that why do we include the street addresses? We don't include the mayor's address, we don't include your address. Why is the speaker's address relevant? On the content itself, I want to give an item that I did find I did not take exception to, and that's page 4 of the meeting minutes, which is page 7 of 76. I felt that gave a decent recap of that particular topic. And I would say that under one of the items where Member Perez requested that on January 11th, that the meeting minutes be brought up for discussion so that it can be clarified that he would like the TEC commission meetings broadcast live. He actually is requesting that the January meeting minutes be amended to correct a staff error as per the requirement of staff. So I don't feel that an accurate job was done to relay that staff is the one who is requiring the amending of the minutes via an agenda item, and which now staff is saying that they are refusing to allow the agenda item, and they have deleted the agenda item, which I have let everybody know. You know, how many times can we move a goalpost? And why are we not allowed to amend a set of meeting minutes in the city of Titusville? You're leaving that question in the residents' minds. But as far as there were 7 instances that I counted of citizen comments that were not included with summaries. 5 of them were my own comments. 1 was Mr. Johnston, 1 was Mr. Klein. And on page 2, Mr. Klein did have some summary content included, but it's page 3 of 8 that it was not. I also noted that the content of your actual discussion was skewed in the direction of the city staff and less in the direction of your actual comments. May I say one more thing that I will not, but I'm going to say that I personally am offering. I will personally add comments, provide them to staff. They can take them or leave them in connection with the tabled minutes for consideration to be included in the minutes. I would personally provide some comments of my own. Thank you.
Could you provide us with a copy of those comments?
I will actually, and I will commit to doing it on or before Monday.
Okay.
Thank you.
One other question, Marty, was that 5 minutes?
No, it was only 3 minutes. That's why I was nervous.
Oh, 3, okay.
It was only 3, and that's all you're allowing for this item?
I'm not sure, we probably should go back and review our bylaws. I know we had maybe 5 minutes at one time. I don't know if they were all.
You typically allow the 5, it's probably set to 3 because of the city council meeting.
Laura Lee brought this up some months ago, and we had a discussion, and we agreed to have 5 minutes.
I would like to say more. I've spent significant time reviewing this. I won't take long, but I would like to make a few more comments if I may.
2 or 2 more minutes.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
I appreciate that. And so I'd like to say that on the page 3 of 8, the Titusville Environmental Commission had a discussion regarding the following. There are 5 items that were listed, and the first 3 seem to be skewed in favor of the discussion where the staff was inserting their view into the TEC, rather than the TEC saying, here's how we feel about collaborating with the city in aligning with the strategic goals. So, and I noted that there was one item, number 4, integrating their goals and objectives with the city council, and I think that Member Delgado was especially robust on that. And then I thought that Member Young said that it was a good idea to get organized instead of keeping going around in circles, you know. And I thought that was a really relevant comment to talk about the city's organizational and how this particular tool can be used as an organizational tool for the TEC to align itself with the city objectives. Member Delgado said a lot about how we're not trying to interfere with the city's business on that, but that we would like to collaborate with them. And I felt that more of that discussion could have been included into the minutes. On the last item on the semi-annual report, there are 2 comments near the bottom of page 6. One of them was that it said where I came to speak either for or against this. I came up and requested that the January 11th unanimous vote about approving and requesting the live streaming and broadcasting of the TEC minutes to be recorded. I asked that to get into the semi-annual report. Now, it was referenced in the semi-annual report that you all requested the live streaming, but there is an absence of saying that you had a vote. I mean, that's a significant thing when you have a unanimous vote, and that is absent in the city's paperwork. They just seem to refuse to want to document the actual vote that happened on January 11th, and which is strongly encouraged to happen again tonight, given the discourse with the minutes. But it's so important that we can't amend them that I support your tabling of them until we get them right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have some information for you about the bylaws about the minutes, or about the time for speaking. So it says that citizens having business before the commission shall be invited to speak via prior discussion of the commission on the matter in which they are concerned. If, in the opinion of the chairman, time limitations are necessary in order to complete the agenda, the chairman may place the time limits for each speaker, but it should be applicable for each speaker on that agenda item. And then under petitions, then it's 5 minutes. That's specifically stated.
That's kind of what I thought. It was very good, yeah. Okay, so we're back to Are there any other cards?
Stan Johnston.
You wanna talk about the minutes?
Stan Johnston. You don't need my address. I've discussed this on a number of occasions with Wanda Wells. And as far as the meeting minutes, it's an issue of discretionary, is the way she described it to me. And that is that you can have it done very differently. You can have it be very brief. You can be very detailed in what you have. And when she says discretionary, I would think that discretionary has to do with the commission itself. It's your discretion. I think part of it's your discretion, but it's also in the discretion of the clerk. I would like to compliment on Laura Darden, because years ago, I have followed a number of times her taking of minutes, and she has been the most detailed that I have ever seen anybody else do. She's just been incredibly thorough. Thank you, Laura. And she's been so thorough that I believe that she's been criticized for being so thorough. So I just want to share that with you about Laura, because she has been really very conscientious, and we're lucky to have her as an employee. So that's all I want to say, is that it's my understanding it's discretionary, and that the question is, what does discretionary mean? Discretionary to the city manager, to the board of commissioners. So thank you, that's all.
Tony Shapiro.
Tony Shipple.
A Parable by Tony Shapiro of Titusville. Many years ago, I started working for Ted Turner at CNN as a media archivist. And at that time, I was the sole person who archived the incoming international news feeds. I had a colleague who did the domestic. And as CNN grew and our bureaus grew and we went further afield and we had other reporters who would want to report on CNN, we hired other people to do this archiving. We would actually look at the incoming feed, decide which sections of the video that we would keep, because storage was expensive. And in deciding what to keep, we would also keyword things so that we could find it again. And we developed standards for our brevity, because I would get something from Christiane Amanpour, she would have a cut package, but then I would get all her raw video, including in Serbia and Yugoslavia, for instance. They went into a school that had been bombed, and there was a child's brain scattered across the desk. It was a little traumatic to actually review, but we kept that, and I archived it, and you never saw it on air, but we saw these things. So my parable is that as you ask for more information, you don't want verbatim everything I'm standing up here saying. You want to hear that Shapiro came and talked about archiving and the dangers of keeping too much information, but I knew when things changed, technology changed, and storage became cheaper than paying a cadre of us, maybe 5 or 7 of us that worked as video archivists for Cable News Network, the entire network. When storage became cheaper than paying us to look at it, they kept everything. And as a result, they couldn't find anything. And I want to take just a minute, please indulge me in this little story. You'll love it. It's a space story. After years of doing international news where I couldn't stand it anymore, I said, if I see one more displaced person, I'm going to go just berserk. And this was before muckers and people went crazy. So the librarian that had been doing the space program was going to DC to open that library, and I got her job to archive all of space. And I was in heaven for the rest of my career at CNN. But when storage became cheaper than having me watch the missions of the shuttle missions, they just kept everything. And it was that crazy lady astronaut from Texas that wore the diaper and drove to Orlando. They couldn't find a single shot of her in the air because I hadn't watched it and said at 5:0238, is astronaut in space, her hair flying, blah, 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 you know? So they couldn't find anything. So you can keep too much, but you can certainly not keep enough. And I think we do need our minutes more fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I have a saying, don't let the tail wag the dog. Okay, but when we're in a situation where we have nothing, it feels like at times, the natural response is to say, give it all.
So back to our motion on the table, unless there's any other cards.
No more cards.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to table the minutes to the next meeting. And Mr. Parrish is going to communicate with the city about creating more information in our minutes. Something less than a verbatim copy. Does that summarize it?
How about a blurb, or even trigger words?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keywords, something more complete. Okay, Lori, you wanna call the vote for us, please?
Member Perez,
Yes?
Vice Chairman Mojek,
Yes.
Member Delgado,
Yes.
Member Fliss,
Yes.
Member Young.
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, before we go on to the next agenda item, we want to recommend moving agenda number 8A above, just before item 6.
you wanna move it to the current, where we are currently in our agenda then?
Correct.
What do you want to do? Do we need a motion for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I make a motion that we move new business up before petitions and requests.
Do I hear a second?
So,
Because they don't want to hear our
Any
comments.
discussion?
They don't want the consultant to hear our comments. That's why.
Okay, another roll call.
Member Young,
Yes.
Member Fliss,
Yes.
Member Delgado, Vice Chairman Mojek,
No.
Member Perez.
no?
I guess we go on to petitions and requests.
Who wants to go? You?
Do we have any cards, or do we need to call cards? We don't call cards on petitions and requests.
Do you want me to go?
If you'd like to
Go
come
for
up
it.
and speak, please do. 5 minutes, the mic is yours.
Good evening. My name is Ford. I live on Beechwood Drive. A few months ago, I attended my very first city council meeting here in Titusville, and I was rather bemused by the amount of time that your city council spent discussing decorating downtown with plastic plants. Now, last night at the city council meeting, I heard mention of the fact that this particular meeting was not videotaped and made available to the public, even though it's held in the same chamber where I was watching the city council meeting live. And I overheard something vague that seemed to come from the city council about that this was a budget issue. Now, I'm speaking from a professional standpoint here. My career was spent in Sarasota at a television station, and I was the news director. I was in charge of a 46-person news crew. I handled videotape equipment and setups. And I'm familiar with budgeting. When the city of Sarasota decided to broadcast live, to at least record, that was in the days of videotape, they were recording their Sarasota City Commission meetings. It's a commission over there, not a council. I lent them my chief engineer, my chief videographer to use as consultants in setting up the chamber to do so. They even hired away one of my guys to run their equipment. Darn them. And after that, everything that took place in that chamber was videotaped. Now, of course, it's cheaper, it's easier, a budgetary issue. It's a drop in the bucket compared to your city budget. This is what we in the biz refer to as the runaround. And I just wanted to comment that this just seems to me like y'all are being given the runaround. In a city that's more interested in plastic plants than allowing the citizens to observe what takes place in this chamber. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
We need to revisit that.
Good evening, Commissioners. Amen to the last speaker. Amen. Please come back every time and say that again until they finally get these meetings recorded and we can stop arguing about meeting minutes and lack of recording the vote, the unanimous vote to recommend to City Council that these meetings be recorded and live streamed. We have Talk of Titusville is here, videotaping. I'm videotaping. Citizens care about this meeting and something has gone amiss, that it's not happening. Amen to the last speaker. I am here to object tonight. I'm here to place an objection to the agenda that has been scrubbed of key data, including the very important item that you guys all had a deliberation a month ago, to talk about the citizen proposals that were presented to you, and that has been scrubbed after you pushed back on the staff, saying no, this is the city manager's purview, get out of my way, and you said, we matter, we want in on that. The charter allows us to, and we want to talk about that, and the city scrubbed it. I am mad about this. I have spent the day. You guys have motivated me. I have a binder now. I'm bindered up. I got it all, okay? So we want to look at something, you just find me. I've spent the day getting organized. I am mad about this. I have spent so much time getting organized and writing to y'all, right? I'm writing to you, I'm writing to the city, I copied the city attorney on it, so he can be all in the loop about instead of the Titusville Environmental Commission, you all are the City Manager Environmental Commission. Welcome to Titusville. Welcome to Titusville. So I'm mad, I didn't have time to frame up my comments, so I thought I would just like to read some of my email to the city council members that I forwarded it to you, so that it is on the record. I've already talked a bit about the move the goalpost with the whole, we can't change our meeting minutes. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to dwell on the deleted item number 2, which is to discuss the citizen proposal regarding the city's strategic performance measures related to the TEC's purview, and which has been scrubbed from this meeting. On May 10th, the TEC voted unanimously to discuss 2 citizen proposals providing recommendations on the city's strategic performance measures pertaining to the environment at the June 14th meeting. Mr. Parrish was present at the meeting and was directed with exactly what materials the TEC wished to discuss. The deleted agenda item is attached to this email. The agenda item is clearly within the city's TEC charter, powers and duties, section B5 of 31-121 powers and duties, and which states that the TEC's specific responsibilities are to provide recommendations on the adoption, prioritization, and implementation of initiatives, actions, policies, and programs to support and promote all aspects of environmental sustainability. Further, city staff has asserted itself as reigning supreme over the city council authority, whereby the same section goes on to state, the city council reserves the right to determine the projects or issues to be reviewed by the TEC. In practice, city staff is reserving the right to determine the projects or issues to be reviewed by you, the TEC, and is thereby usurping the right of the city council as well. City council members stated on March 7th that they wish to have more metrics shared with citizens, yet city staff is prohibiting the TEC from discussing the city metrics, exclamation point. Mr. Parrish advised in the same email to commissioners on May 25th that the item was being removed from the agenda. He stated, the council adopted their budget goals and strategies for this year, therefore the city manager's metrics, notice the ownership of those metrics, for department heads will not be on the June TEC agenda. Attached are the council's March 7th council special meeting minutes. I would point out that I personally attended and spoke at the March 7th City Council workshop meeting where multiple council members expressed an interest in understanding and relaying city metrics to residents. This included an inquiry from Councilwoman Stokoe to Mr. Larice about the city performance measures document. During public comment, I personally spoke on the importance of this document becoming a usable document for city council and residents and shared an attachment showing that the document has changed little over the past 3 years. The proposed agenda item is consistent with City Council members' intent to include metrics in the city decision-making process, and the city response simply thwarts the will of the citizens that presented the proposal, the will of the TEC that unanimously voted for the agenda item, and the expressed interest of council members at the March 7th workshop. I object to this not being on tonight's agenda. Thank you for hearing my comment, and I will receive any questions. My binder, I'm all ready.
Is there a motion? Anybody else?
I'll reserve my emotions. The comments are, thank you very much. Both of you.
Stan Johnson, registered professional engineer, former employee of the city of Titusville. I'm going to tell you is that, in my opinion, the Titusville Environmental Commission is very important, and what you're doing is very important. And our city is going downhill because the council's not listening to you, and it's not, and neither is the city manager. But there's like 3 points I want to make, and that is that first of all, thank you for not changing the 8A item to be before petitions and requests, because that is what happened a few months ago, is when you rearranged the agenda so petitions and requests would be heard before these items. So thank you for refusing this request by Mr. Parrish, which I think was probably from our city manager, to discourage people. Now, the second item I have is that there's 3 items. Is that city council does it, and as far as I'm concerned, is you guys can do it too. And that is that you can add those items to the agenda at the meeting, just like council does. Council will come in and will say, well, we want to add another agenda item, and they vote on it and they do it. You can do the same thing. You can add these 2 items or whatever items that Kristen had spoke about that have been deleted. You can do it. I don't see anything that's stopping you. That's another thing I wanted. The third item is it has to do with my testimony and presentation to you a few months ago about the sewage spill that's denied by the city of Titusville. And I have spoke just last night again to council and explained to them is that this sewage spill was not just in the 9 city streets. It was during the hurricane, and it mixed with the waters of the hurricane and went into people's, almost to their doorsteps. So when people went to get their mail or went to their cars, they walked through it. And they took it into their house. People likely got, but some people likely got sick, but there was the thing about the sewage spills is I report, and the city is supposed to contact where the FDEP contacts the county health department. That's what I'm told. And county health department, and also the city already knows that they're supposed to post signs, warning signs of the sewage spill. Nothing was posted. So what I did was, as you know, is that I post some signs, put it on people's doors, City Hall, County Courthouse, and even to the mayor, Dr. Stokel, and so forth like that, of the sewage spill, and yet city manager still denies it happened, and the council went ahead and they endorsed that. So it's truth and facts should be important, but they're not getting there. So as you know, as people criticize me, say, well, you know, you shouldn't attack people. Well, I think I should tell the truth. In this case, I said that the city manager is a liar, cheat, and a shyster. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not necessarily attacking him, that's trying to protect the people. So I'm asking you, here's what my request is that I'm asking you to, that the TEC recognize the presentation photos that I made and the witness of me, Laura Lee Thompson, and others of the sewage spill into 9 city streets, September, October 2022, that is denied by the city manager and endorsed by council, and request council to recognize this sewage spill contrary to the denial of the city manager. Can we read that again? I'll read it again. Okay, time. I'm requesting that the TEC recognize the presentation and photos that I presented to you of the sewage spill and the witness of me, Laura Lee Thompson, and others of the sewage spill into 9 city streets of September, October 2022, and is denied by city manager and endorsed by council, and request council to recognize the sewage spill contrary to the denial by city manager. That's my request.
Thank you, Stan.
Can we make that motion?
I don't know, we're here to make motions.
Let's make that motion. Let's use Stan's words in it, because it's pretty clear cut. Because we have enough people that witnesses, there seems to be enough evidence to back it up. So I make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second, so the details of that, you have all this.
Second.
The details that we would need to provide.
The photos.
Your request,
Your request.
can we have those words?
Oh, of course, they're on recorded right now, but I can repeat it. You want me to repeat what I said?
Can you give it to Laura, so that she has it?
I'll
I
have
can
to
help.
rewrite it,
I can
because
help.
she probably can't read my writing.
Why don't you read it off what you got?
May I interrupt? What is this motion? Is it on a topic that is on your agenda? You're making direction on? Because when you make a decision, when you make a motion, members of the public should have a right to speak about something that's noticed on your agenda.
Right. Petitions and requests. We just got a petition, we're making a motion to accept it. What's wrong with that?
Well, his motion is, or his recommendation to you is to do a direction to city council.
Based on the information that he's collected.
The evidence that he has.
And that we also had a presentation on it a couple of months ago.
That's right.
Yes, on an agenda item from a past meeting several months ago.
Yeah.
That's not being discussed tonight.
So are you saying that we have to put this on the agenda again?
Yes, ma'am, that's rules of order. That's,
Okay, then I make a motion that we put this, I retract that motion that I just did.
Okay.
And make a motion that we put this on the agenda again to discuss,
So that it's on the agenda.
so that it's on the agenda, so that we could,
Not to be erased in the meantime before the next meeting.
so that we can address it, so that we can send a recommendation or to
The city.
the city about it.
so you're making a motion to add an agenda item to your future meeting.
Yes.
What is the topic? What's the title?
The sewage spill of
Sewage spill, the
September, October
unreported sewage spill
2022.
last fall.
So this is something you've already discussed, you've already received information from the city about, but you're gonna bring it back again.
No, we received a presentation from Stan about it too.
Yes, but you also asked staff for records, which we provided to you. So you want to revisit this issue again.
Yes.
Did we make a recommendation based on that
I thought we
to
had.
council? I thought we had.
Did it ever get beyond that?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'll take a look at the tracking sheet that we provide to you so we can make sure.
So what I can do is I'll just write what I said and send it to your email. How's that sound? Okay.
Clear, thank you.
I'll send it to Brad, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily need to be here right now, but since I'm not real sure about.
I'm sorry to
Oh, I'm Jeff Greenberg.
Mr. Greenberg, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. There's still a motion on the table to add this on your
Oh,
agenda.
okay, just, I'm sorry, I was ignoring.
There was a second. That action needs to be completed.
Second.
Thank you. Now there's this.
No, that's to move it to the next meeting, right?
No, you're adding this
Next
agenda.
meeting, yeah, okay. I just wanna make sure I know what we're discussing. Any other discussion? Okay, Lori, let's have a roll call.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Majek,
Yes.
Member Young,
Yes.
Member Delgado,
Yes.
Member Fliss.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff Greenberg, I'm here because I was actually requested to be here, both by Laura Lee and Mike too. And I don't know if the reason I'm supposed to be here will actually get handled tonight, so I just wanted to say something first. I am here to represent an initiative that really is not a Titusville initiative, but we're looking to try to get cooperation from the city to help for this. And I think the TEC already knows, and they will be getting documentation of some of these details, since Laura Lee had it brought up and already had a vote for supporting this initiative, which I greatly appreciate. Twice I came to city council and tried to say something about it, and actually was fairly rudely shut down, particularly by the city manager. And I mean, I greatly regret having to say something like that. I greatly regret that we're meeting in an environment here where we actually have good guys and we have bad guys. And to some people, we're the bad guys, which is really sad, really sad. And I thoroughly disagree. But just to let you know that the city, and I assume probably through the manager, composed 20 questions for me in particular to answer about this proposed initiative. And I have answered all of those. And I think you'll have copies, hopefully you'll have copies of the questions. I know that, I think, Mike, did you get the questions?
Yes, I got the questions and the.
Okay, excellent. And I made more copies anyway as well. And I spent 3 pages to give the answers for this. I can give you an executive summary a little bit. I feel that though the city is trying to oppose something that really needs to be done, and the only possible opposition could be a political opposition to trying to do the right thing environmentally. Some of the questions were really not very well put together. Some of the questions I think are pretty important, and I hope that I pointed those properly. So just to give you a little context as you read through these things, this is what it's all about. It should also perhaps go on record that we don't need the city. Matter of fact, once I got shut down rudely by city manager and others, even the mayor didn't behave very properly, I think, when I came up to talk. I basically went to the county and I went to many other different entities to try to get this forwarded. This is something in great, great demand by those who look at the lagoon right now in great needs. And right now it would be a very sore thumb that the city of Titusville is the only one who's not supportive. Shameful is the only word I can use. And yet it just sort of piles on everything else that we've been hearing so far. And I regret that because I live here and I love this place. And I would hate to think that there's people who are so bound and determined to avoid science and to avoid the things that are good for human life and all the other life in here would actually oppose this. So that is my position. I'm obviously not neutral when it comes to the reason I want to propose this, just to let you know the context again. And if you have any questions, I am easily attainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure where to go from here. We made a motion last month to acknowledge Jeff's project, and then that got yanked off our agenda. And yet Jeff is here, and he's answered the city's questions who have stepped in the way of our advice to council. I'd like to know from staff why and where we're going next, because this is something that we all are concerned about seeing get done without the city getting in the way.
So to respond to your accusation that we're stepping in the way, it's incorrect, sir.
Really?
Yes, let me explain.
Please.
We receive your recommendations for motions, and we have to evaluate them to see how we can present them before city council.
That's not what the charter says. The charter says we make motions to city council, not to staff.
Then we try to understand what that motion is, and then we have.
But that doesn't get.
May I speak, sir? You've given me an opportunity to speak. You've asked me a question. Let me have that opportunity.
Please.
So we have come back to you, actually on an agenda item at the end of this meeting, to ask you questions about that particular motion, to see if we can understand it better and understand how we can present this to city council. Because we have already brought this to them 2 other times, 2 different recommendations from this body, 2 different variations. This is a 3rd version now we're bringing before city council. So we have several questions that we need to get answered from you in order before we can bring this before city council, so we can make sure we understand what's being presented. So I have several questions that were given to me by several staff members, including the city manager. I provided that to Mr. Greenberg, but it's not my intent to do that at this time. It's my intent to bring these questions up to you and ask you what you can tell us to help clarify this recommendation to city council. Now, if we're satisfied, we understand what's being asked, we'll bring it before city council. Have on the tracking sheet, you see many other examples where we look at this and determine if we can definitely understand what the recommendation is, we'll bring it before city council. If we do not, we come back to you to get more clarification. So that's what we're trying to do later at the end of this meeting.
Waiting for me. All right, what's next? No more
Thank you.
petitions or requests then? All right. So to me, this would be old business, what we're just discussing right now with Mr. Greenberg. But there's nothing listed under old business, so.
Because you made a recommendation to city council, you do not make a motion to table it to your next meeting as old business.
I'm even further confused.
We go on to the next item.
Just never got that.
I would like to ask a question. And it's a question about process. Since I'm the one who started that motion, sent to council, whether we wanted to go into testing of the outdoors. And we had discussion. And I took it as staff had all the pertinent information to give council. It says, listen, there is a body of people that have the money, the resources, okay, and would like to do testing of our outfalls, waters that we have, including some ponds like Sand Point and other places. It is that kind of process that I'm trying to understand. So it never got to council. Is that what happened?
No, sir, it's not been brought before council yet.
Okay. So therefore, our recommendation went into some study or discussion by the staff. Okay, so it was never floated to council as a recommendation from TEC. And that is still held until tonight as the last item that we will discuss to see if clarify what is it that we wanted, our wishes were on that motion to send to council. You know, I don't know if it's a wording issue, I don't know if it's a technical issue, you know. So I guess I need some clarification as when we unanimously vote to recommend to support the citizen initiative, as it says on the minutes. I'm just reading from the minutes. Okay, now on page 208. Okay. So that states purpose. Okay, that states the wish and grant permission for the citizens to go and collect the data. Okay. If that's what the motion was, and so that's exactly what the minutes are saying. Doesn't that go forward to council, or does it still into pitch in and gets looked at differently, and perhaps say, well, how about this, what about that, and that's why it came back tonight?
Like I said before, this is a similar recommendation to 2 others that were presented by the TEC. So we were looking at this and wondering, how is this different from the others? So we have some questions that we want to ask you about, and so that we can provide those answers to the council when we present this item. So they will ask us, why is this coming before us again? We can have those answers for them. That's basically what I wanted to ask you at your agenda item under staff reports at the end of this meeting. I was not planning to go through all of these questions. I was going to go through basic, more general questions about how this is supposed to work and why one particular person or body is being requested to have permission to go on city's property to do this kind of testing versus any other. What kind of programming that means, because usually there's some kind of program that's established that will allow this kind of process. So this is just some general questions I'd like to bring up during that agenda item. If you like, talk about that now, just right now, but your agenda is still on petitions and requests. We haven't gone to the next part yet.
I think we're done with petitions and requests. This was the last petition.
What do you guys want to do?
Shall we
Wait till the end?
wait till the end and continue with the agenda?
And stay with the agenda?
All right,
We'll wait till the end.
we're back on. That means
Thank you.
we're back on to 8A, tree technical manual. Review and provide input on the draft text.
So this item, back in August 2022, the commission recommended to City Council to replace the current tree list in the city's technical manual, which is attached to the agenda here, with the native keystone species to grow in Brevard County list provided by the UF IFAS Brevard Extension Office. The native keystone species list is attached. At the September 15th, 2022 regular TEC meeting, the commission amended their original motion to include the sable palmetto in addition to the native keystone species list. This motion also recommended that any occurrence of nuisance tree be replaced with prohibited tree. On October 25th, 2022, Council approved the Commission's recommendation to replace the landscaping technical manual tree list. Consider the recommendation, provide for direction on replacing the current tree list in the city's technical manual, using the said keystone species list. Council directed staff to take the TEC's recommendation and incorporate into the current tree list in our code in the city's technical manual. Council desired not to replace the current tree list in the city's technical manual, however, incorporate the TEC's recommendation to modify the current tree list. So we invited Kimley-Horn it's your landscape architect with Kimley-Horn. We tasked her and asked her to help us out with fulfilling this request. We have in your agenda, beginning on page 14 of your packet, is the proposed list from Shima. I do want to point out, though, real quick to you that on page 26 of your packet, we'll show you the information and direction that was specifically given to City Council. This is the agenda cover sheet that was given to them, telling them what your recommendation was with the motion attached. You'll see on page 29, the keystone species list that was provided to us. You'll see on page 59 of the packet, the original tree technical manual that is inside the city's code currently. I do want to run you through it real quick. If you see on page 59, it starts out with canopy trees and gives you a height range, and then lists recommended species. Further down, it gives you on page 60, understory trees, and those are considered to be trees 30 feet or less. On page 63 of your packet, you'll see it starts with shrubs and the recommended vegetation. The reason I'm pointing that out to you is because this is the format, it's our current code. We recommended that the format remains be the same, so that what Shima did was take the recommended vegetation that was from this other list that was proposed by you, incorporate it into this version, which you'll see back at the beginning of the agenda item on page 14. The reason we suggested that was because the format of the current tree technical manual is important, because that helps us implement the landscape regulations that we have in our code. So changing it with something completely different or reformatting it would have thrown off some of the regulations that were also inside the code. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shima, and she will go through a presentation, I guess, that will just kind of highlight different topics to talk about as we go through this. This is going to be the one opportunity the commission will have to be able to ask questions and provide comments and recommendations. The next step after this, we'll bring this back before the city council, and they will give us direction to go ahead and draft an ordinance potentially.
Thank you, Brad. Like you mentioned, my name is Shima Laguerre, and I am the consultant from Kimley-Horn. So today we're really just going to talk about what exactly we were scoped to do for the city of Titusville, and what we provided for the city of Titusville and for you all to review, which is that technical tree manual. We're basically going to just go over the agenda. So we will review the scope of exactly what we were supposed to do throughout this proposal that we have for them. We will then review a working document that we have communicated with Brad and his team through conversations, I think, a month ago, where we actually went through the document and we marked up some items that we have, and we had resident comments as well that we can talk about and discuss. And then we will look at the resident comments that we have compiled. A majority of them were similar, but we have compiled it into a working document that is within this presentation that we can discuss. And then at the very end, we would then have an open discussion with the commission and everyone in the room if they wanted to discuss this technical tree manual that we have provided. So first and foremost, we had our review scope. What was our scope? So we were told to completely basically update the technical tree manual within Titusville by looking at the UF IFAS extension and the Florida friendly manual list that is present when we as consultants have to come before Titusville to do land development. We have to look at all those lists, we have to figure out what's native, what's not, and then basically present our plans to the city of Titusville by using those lists. And we were told that we needed to update that list with information that was actually particular to the city of Titusville. When we reviewed the list, we saw that there were a lot of vegetation on there that wasn't necessarily native to Titusville, native to Clark County, and that wasn't conducive for the city of Titusville. So what we decided, we used IFAS, we used Florida Friendly, and we came up with the list that is before you there. So that's what we were supposed to do. And through conversations with Brad and his team and through residents' comments, we noticed that there were additional things that we just were not aware of, being residents and consultants that do not live in Titusville. So we have taken those comments into hand, and we have marked up our document to address what those are, and we can work through those through open communication. So let's see. So I don't know if I can actually go to this working document.
Oh, up here?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay.
They have it on the agenda.
They have it on the agenda. Okay. So if you see. So what we will do, I don't know if you have the working document that we gave to Brad. It is that manual.
So the manual starts on page 14 of your packet.
Yep, perfect. So on the manual, some of the comments that we had in the very beginning is that we decided to, based on the IFAS list and based on the Florida friendly list, they basically, they outlined their category of trees differently than the city of Titusville. The city of Titusville called canopy trees that were 50 feet to 100 feet canopy trees. However, in both of those lists, they were called large trees. So through communications with Fred, we have actually gone ahead and updated that to no longer say large trees, it will say overstory trees, which is something that is actually written throughout the entire code.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. So we have taken that large trees and now it's gonna be overstory because that is what is within the land development code and that is what we as consultants have to adhere to. As well as there were a lot of other comments from, I believe, Mr. Bill Young and some other residents regarding trees that we have on the list that we might need to look at basically per their characteristics, if they actually will survive in Titusville, even though they are recommended on the IFAS list and the Florida friendly list, we will take those comments into consideration as well. We know that there are southern flash pines that we had on our list. I think it's maybe halfway down that there's another variety that we should include, which is the variety densa. We have the variety Eliatai, which is similar to densa, but we noticed that that is one that should be incorporated on the list, so we have made that notation as well. If you go to the second page, where it says medium trees, we understand that that is not something that the city of Titusville has. That will be removed to be understory trees, and within that list, we then have to combine the medium trees, which will be overstory, with the small trees. So we now have basically gone back and looked at each of these trees, and we have identified which one would be considered overstory and which one would be considered understory based on the UF IFAS extension list. And so we have that marked up in our document. Obviously, I can provide that at a later date if you would like to look at that. But there is one tree on the overstory list that we will completely remove based on recommendations from Brad and from the residents and from commission staff, is that the Chinese elm should not be allowed within the city of Titusville. We know that is a very popular tree that is in other counties in Florida, but obviously Titusville is not one that residents or staff would like to see, so that is one that we will not allow consultants to have. Again, this list is a recommendation. It's not something that we can actually say, you can't plant this. It is a recommended list. At the end of the day, when developers do come in and they do want to build in the city of Titusville, it is still up to staff to say, yes, you can, and no, you can't. This is just a recommended list of what we have based on our professional experience and doing the research, what will grow in Titusville, what is best suitable for Titusville based on the UF IFAS list and that Florida friendly list. So throughout this entire manual, we have identified a plethora of species that is recommended. Obviously, it's up to us as consultants and the city staff to say, hey, yes, this is allowed, or no, this is not allowed, but that will come when plans are given to the staff to review. However, we wanted to give them a broad variety of items. We didn't want to limit it to, let's say, 10 overstory trees and 10 understory trees, because then the city of Titusville would look like a monoculture. So we wanted to actually be a broader list of what's native, what will grow in this zone, which is 8B, and then what is actually suitable for land development. 9B, sorry, that is correct, yeah. 8B is
long past.
Yeah, Virginia, so yeah, I got you on that. So throughout the rest of the list, we did incorporate a shrub list. So we segmented out by large shrubs, medium shrubs, and small shrubs. But again, we noticed that that isn't something that the city of Titusville wanted, so it would just be shrubs that the developer can then say, okay, based on their personal and professional experience, they know what is a large shrub, what is a medium shrub, what is a small shrub, but within the list, it'll just be called shrubs. We also incorporated ground covers because that is something that is within the Titusville code, that you don't just have to have shrubs, you do have to have ground covers as part of vehicular use areas, or when you have building frontages, you have to have both. So we wanted to incorporate that within the list as well. We do have grasses because we know that within Titusville and Brevard County, grasses are something that is extremely native and something that, if done correctly, can be done really well. And we have only a few items because we know that grasses to this particular area are small, but we did want to incorporate them and have them separated from ground covers or shrubs, because they are something that is actually different. We have vines as well, perennials, and I believe that is the end of the list that we created. So one thing that I did want to note is that the current manual that we do have does not talk about the drought tolerance or if a plant is native or not. Those were things that I discussed with my colleagues, and when I look at it as a consultant, that would be helpful, because there are requirements for us to have a certain amount of native plants on our plans, as well as if we're going to develop something that is closer to water, or if it's more inland, we would want to know if it's salt tolerant. So those are things that we added to the list that we think would be beneficial for consultants like ourselves to actually have on the list. And when we talked to Brad and his staff, that would be something that is allowed. So we would have to incorporate drought tolerance, salt tolerance, and if it was a native or non-native species. And we believe that having those things on there just gives consultants a better idea, if they're not familiar with Brevard County and Titusville, of what actually they should be using within the city. Let's see, and then there were a couple other comments that we wanted to have. We wanted to make it note, and we would have additional items on the technical manual that stated that the perennials list is just a recommended list within the overall tree manual and not a requirement. All plants must be irrigated until establishment, and that we would determine what trees would be the definition of a tree within Brevard County. We would make that known, that based on the definitions within the code, the land development code, a tree would be defined on our list. There are some confusions we had when I talked to Brad and some of his staff of what exactly is a tree, and there's a definition within the code that we would actually add at the bottom of the list, that this is what is a tree. And then we would do the same for shrubs as well. So within the list, we would have a conducive and a complete item and a recommended list, not a requirement. It would be recommended for consultants to use this when they are developing within Titusville. And so now we can actually go ahead and have that open discussion.
Members list?
I'm happy to see that you have salt tolerances and whether it's native or not. Those were aspects that we all felt very, very strongly about being on the list. So I'm glad to see that.
I too am glad to see that. What I want to know, which I can't tell from this, is how many of these non-natives are non-friendly. Because we started with our original list, which had a bunch of non-native unfriendlies. Mm-hmm. And when we went to the discussion of having only Florida natives, and then we later added Florida friendly to that, it was with the intent that by default we would remove all of the noxious plants from the list.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure that happened when I saw the so.
Okay, so basically the list that we have here is a combination of the IFAS list and the Florida friendly list. So every plant that is within here are from those two databases. So
not a single one of these would be considered a Florida invasive class 1, 2, 3.
I would have to go back and look through every single one, but I do know that every plant that is on this list came from both of those databases. We looked at the original list that was presented, and we basically said, okay, we spent maybe a week and a half saying, okay, these are the trees that are on this list. Are they on the Florida friendly list? Are they on the IFAS list? If they weren't, we marked it red. When we looked at that, we then went back and said, why don't we just start with the Florida friendly list, look at the zone, it's 9B, okay, great.
Right.
Let's start with those, and then we went to IFAS and did the exact same thing. So there may have been maybe one or two, but overall, we can go back and look through and say, okay, is this invasive, is this not? And if it is invasive and it's on that Florida friendly list, then that needs to be removed from their list as well. Right. So that's something that we can look at. But I do know that every plant that is in this manual came from both of those lists.
Okay, and nowhere else?
No.
Okay.
I think it's a beautiful list.
Thank you.
Are you familiar with the new hardiness zones that are being proposed?
I'm not, no.
Well, Zone 1 covers the tip of Miami, but Zone 2 kind of covers from the bottom of Okeechobee up to the Virginia border.
Really?
And goes all the way across to Arizona. And Zone 3 goes to the North Carolina border, then the Virginia border, but
okay.
Essentially there's only 6.
So they basically revamped the entire.
They've revamped the entire thing. They flipped the numbers around, so 1 is on the bottom and 6 is like up in frostbite falls, you know?
I don't think myself or our entire team is aware of that, no.
But that's something to look
Yeah,
into,
okay.
because we know that with global warming, we know with warming temperatures, we're not going to be into 9C, we're going to be sliding into what is now zone 10, or eventually this zone 2, which apparently is gonna span many hundreds of miles north of us. So we need to not be looking at plants and trees that are zone 9A or zone 8B or whatever, anything further north, because we know it's gonna be getting warmer. The heat index is gonna be going higher, and we need to be, you know, forward-looking in that regard. So some of these trees, which may be Florida native and friendly, and thrive here today, may not be in another 30 years. And so if we see tree species that go from 6 to 9B versus one that goes from 8 to 10, we may wanna be thinking more on those. I don't know how we would add this into the manual to weight it that way, but I can just see as we move forward, you know, decade after decade, and the sea level rises, we need to be cognizant of that too.
Yeah, I think that is actually a valuable, option that we can look at, and I do know that we did take into consideration if it was, let's say, a 9A and to like 10B, we said, okay, if it's within that range, we can include it within this manual.
Right.
Now, we may have done 8B to 9B and said, okay, it does grow in 9B, but it may be better in 8A, but we will leave that up to the discretion of the consultant and the staff to say, okay, this plant can grow here, but they may at the end of the day say, maybe not on this plan. So it may be that, let's say, a red maple, yes, it will grow, but maybe you shouldn't put it so close to the coastline. Maybe it could be more inland in Titusville. So we didn't want to necessarily stop having all of the plants that were 8A to 9B on the list. We wanted to recommend that they be on the list, but it's up to the consultants and the client and the staff's direction to say, when it comes to presenting a plan for them, maybe you need to sub out these plants for these plants. But we didn't want to provide that there were opportunities to expand it north and south.
Sure. Anybody? Shall we accept the report? I don't know, what are we supposed to do?
I think that this is acceptable, and I'd like to put forth a motion that we accept it.
Okay.
A second.
Okay. Any discussion? Bill? Back here?
I'm really happy to see it, that's the discussion, it's really
Now
not.
you're talking, okay.
But I do have a question.
Okay.
In the area of grasses, and again, I'm a space engineer, so I don't grow stuff. I love rocks, but besides that, I don't see my common, I went to IFAS, I own some property outside the city limit, and I needed to sod, to give you some example, 22 pallets.
Okay.
Which is a truck.
Yeah.
And some more. Okay, and so I went to IFAS and talked to those guys. And I said, listen, what grass, what, I know I did not wanna go with Floridan, I did not wanna go with San Augustine, I have had those experiences before. And the gentleman, the head of the local office, says, I have great Argentine bahia to put down.
Correct.
Am I missing that out of this list?
So that is considered, not, so grasses, sod is different from grasses. So grasses are what we consider muley grass, our Fakahatchee, our Elliott's love grass, those are grasses. Those are from the IFAS and the Florida friendly list. Bahia and St. Augustine are considered sods. Those are not considered grasses. So that could be something that we can add to the list. We can say sod, and that can be, we can say you can do Bahia grass, you can do Floritan, you can do these types of sod, but that could be something that we can add to the list versus grasses.
Maybe that's the way to do it.
Well, that's what I was looking, if I'm a contractor and developer,
Gotcha.
that's what I'm gonna look for,
Okay.
okay? And if I don't see it, then
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with whatever is more convenient and my knowledge.
So you would like us to add a sod within?
I think it will be something that needs to be considered seriously, because the developers who are gonna go to staff and say, I'm gonna put 20 pallets in my development of this stuff. we need to, I would say, yeah, that's on the list or not. And like I said, my experience is I went twice, and that's what they recommended.
Right.
And I went to Bombay and bought
Okay.
one trailer plus a truck full of this stuff, and got laid down, and it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes very little care, and
It does,
you know.
so that's something that we can definitely add. I do believe that that'll be, I'm not aware if it actually is somewhere within the code that if sod is already listed, but I can go back and talk to Brad and his staff and see. But I don't believe that it's there. If it's not, then we can add another section to the list, similar to what we've done with Corona, so we can add that.
Yeah, I would give to knowledge
Mhm.
and experience, but like I said, I'm just sharing my experience
Gotcha.
with large areas to cover. I'm sure the developers, Brookshire, who's building a lot of houses,
Things that.
it's not one of these grasses that they're putting on.
So those grasses would be considered, let's say, so when we're developing properties, multifamily, single-family developments, when they look for grasses, they are looking for things that would go along like a pond. So at the pond edge, we have to use grasses, we can't use ground cover or shrubs. So a developer would know that if the code says somewhere that you have to grass or sod the edge of a pond, that's two options. Typically, we will do bahia sod to the bottom, but then they will do some accent palms or accent grasses, which would be muhly grass. So the developer would know, hopefully, if they're a good developer, they would know, but that is a recommendation that we can absolutely add and say, we have sod, these are the typical sods that grow in Titusville and Brevard County, use those if you need to within your plans.
Given the IFAS experience, I think it may be suitable to do that, and it will actually help staff.
Yeah.
On a 4,000 house development, with no
What?
No trees, no trees.
With no trees, and yeah, can we make sure that we keep St. Augustine out of the sod section?
Exactly.
Things that take heavy water usage and require maintenance in that category should not be something that we're pushing. Sod by itself is already a huge stormwater runoff, right?
It is.
It's just impervious, and so making us use sod that requires rain or allowing citizens to use that, our potable groundwater, our finite resource there to be feeding grass that could be easily bahia or something else. That's my biggest concern with grass.
I can't say that I won't put it on the list, because again, this isn't a required list, it's a recommended list, so I think it's.
Recommended.
I think that's something where the developer should have the option, if they want to have a certain look for their development, they should be able to use either bahia or St. Augustine. Now, as a consultant, none of my clients want to use St. Augustine, they know about it, they're like, it's more expensive than bahia, but having it on there at least allows them to say, maybe we do want a formal entry somewhere, and maybe they don't want to use bahia, so I think having it on the list gives them the opportunity.
They can use Bermuda, they can use centipede. There are other grasses available here that don't require that kind of.
There are, but I think at the same time, there are other.
She's talking about adding a list of sods, which is going to include these things.
I think at the same time, there are trees on this list that require a lot of water as well. Would you like me to take those off the list? But again, this is a recommended list, not required. We should be able to show what does grow within Titusville.
Yes.
And if that becomes an issue where maybe we don't wanna show St. Augustine, maybe there should be a requirement that says that you can't water a certain amount of times if you have this type of sod. Maybe that should be another thing that's added to.
Can I say something?
For me.
We do have.
I've had my light on for a while, everybody's jumping in here. Well, I had two thoughts, and one of them, Michael just jumped out with the soja. Okay, can't we have something similar to what we have here for the grasses and the trees and whatnot? The tolerance, you know, whether it's drought tolerant, obviously that's important.
Yes, that would be added to the list.
Right.
So it will follow the example that we have above.
Okay, salt tolerance as well, you know,
Yes.
shade versus, you know, sunlight tolerance. Thank you.
No torpedo grass either.
No what?
No torpedo grass either.
No, I would
No
never.
broom grass either, you know.
I mean, if they're gonna put in sod, it's, be careful.
No, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the agenda.
We had a motion, but
Oh.
I don't
Sorry.
have a second or roll call.
Yeah, that's right, we have a motion to accept the report.
Oh,
You seconded, yes, so we need a vote, right? Or do we just an all in favor?
Who seconded? Cause I don't have it.
Tom did.
Oh,
Sorry.
me, Mr. President. I would roll call.
Okay, roll call.
Member Young,
Yes.
Member Delgado,
Yes.
Member Fliss,
Yes?
Vice Chairman Majak.
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
I suppose we could. Member Perez, off the table.
I'd like to entertain a motion, okay, based on, what's happening with our prior, motion in January. I'd like to make a motion to have, a live stream and video recordings equivalent to what exists for all other commissions that follow Robert's Rules of Order and allow members who are on leave with permission from council, okay, to dial in via Zoom as well.
Is this a agenda item again, or is it something that, are we still under 8A?
I thought we were.
I thought we just finished 8A.
So now we're on petitions and requests.
Oh, excuse me.
I sounds like I would recommend maybe, because there's an opportunity on the reports, and that's also an opportunity for each member, chairman, and each person to also make report. So that might be an opportunity to discuss any additional items that you want to make a motion on, recommendation to city council. But just so you know, when you do that, that also opens up an opportunity for someone to speak when you're going to make a recommendation for an action.
We may have spoken about this before. Yeah, we have spoken about it before. Okay, well, moving on. Petitions and requests from the public present. Anybody else? Hey, Ms. Sheffield, our favorite. Like to share.
Never one to not come and cheerlead for the TEC, Shipolo, Norwood House. It's wonderful to see you guys beginning to really figure out what to do and seeking a way to do it. And I'm sorry, Mr. Parrish, but you're just gonna have to ride with these guys because rah, you're doing a job that needs to be done. And I wanna just point out for public record, since this is petitions, I know you can't do anything about this, so I'm not making a request, but I just wanna point out that the city of Titusville, by suing this, Speak Up Titusville, to get the right to clean water into the, as an amendment to the city charter, has cost us over $25,000. I just want to stress that because $25,000, I was in this to raise 4,000 petitions, not to raise $25,000. I live on $10,000 a year. Those of you who know me, I don't miss an opportunity for a free lunch. That's because I'm a poor person. And I thought raising 4,000, I begrudged the paper that I had to use my printer ink to print the petitions on. And now I'm looking at legal bills of $25,000. I just want that in public record. The city of Titusville is costing the citizens of Speak Up Titusville and the 82% of voters who voted for the right to clean water. It's costing us a little fortune. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sheffield. Anybody else? Okay, I guess that takes us on to reports. Staff report. Item 10.
We can start with staff reports, or we can start with commission reports. I just put that on there as an opportunity to make sure that I have an opportunity to be able to speak and ask some questions for you on this item.
You have the floor.
All right. So I did not include anything on the agenda here, but your recommendation at your last meeting stated Member Delgado made a motion recommending to City Council to support the city's initiative to grant permissions to citizens to have access to the city's outfalls to collect water samples and report their findings back to the commission. So this was a recommendation similar to two others that made by this commission to City Council. Council made a decision on those others. So we have some questions that some of our staff members have come up with, including the city manager. And the main question we want to ask you is, what is the outcome of this? What is the purpose of this? And why one particular citizen? And especially since there are many other organizations that do this already. So those are the kind of questions, those are the two main questions I can see already the City Council asking when we bring this before them, when they've seen something similar to this already.
If I may, I'd like to invite Dr. Jeff Greenberg to come in and have a seat there at the table so he can be on the microphone to answer many of these questions.
Yeah.
Dr. Greenberg is a professor emeritus in this very area of the environment, and I'll let him answer your questions there as to why this one's different.
Well, excuse me, is this on?
Yeah, the mic button.
There we go, okay. Again, I think.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Greenberg. I think as co-chair or vice chair or whatever he is, chair pro tem, Mike Jack mentioned, I've got about 50 years experience doing environmental science and water resources and all kinds of things related to sanitation. And so I have a CV if anybody wants to have a look at it. I think that's a pertinent issue when we talk about expertise to get something done. One reason why I felt sort of pretty bad too when I was not treated very well by the city council when I went before them. Mr. Parrish mentioned that this has come up 2 other times as well. I was not familiar at all that other than the couple of times that I tried through a 3-minute little tiny blurb to say something, that there was any other presentation on this initiative at all before the city council. I didn't know if this TEC had actually proposed anything previously, but I knew from this last time that there was that support. So I have taken those 20 questions that came from the city, whoever they generated those from, and I have answered those things, and they are now in print. All of you have a copy of that, and if you need a copy, it's right there. So any specific question of the 20, I'd be very happy to appoint, and I'm here. Sorry, we weren't all prepared for this earlier.
Yeah, there was an initial question that Brad threw out.
Yeah, why is this needed? Why is it different?
Why, yeah, now.
Well, I think the main question is, what are we testing?
What are we testing? It's a double project. It does real-time, continuous data testing of water on outflows from the land into the IRL. And this would be fairly common sorts of properties: pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, and also rate of flow. So we know how much water is going in. And all of these things can be done through remote sensors. And this is where we really need the cooperation from the city, is to find places within the outflow that those sensors can be installed. Note completely that there is no expense whatsoever to the city for anything that we're talking about doing, so we're not making any appeal there. We're only looking for access to those outflow sites. And it would not interrupt, it would not interfere with anything else. That would give us a lot of information that is completely unknown at present. It is not being collected by anybody anywhere. And we've spent several weeks looking at all the different agencies in Florida, all the different universities, and asking that question: are you guys monitoring? Are you doing this? There's a group called ORCA, which is the Ocean Research Conservation Agency, I believe. And they said, oh, we're already sampling that stuff. Well, they're not. The only sampling that's really being done at all is sporadic sampling, first of all, not systematic scientific sampling, which has great validity in making decisions, but it's being done out in the lagoon. I mean, they're measuring fish, they're measuring water, and they're doing it in different sorts of places, so it's not a systematic study. It's not one that is rigorous in the sense that it's doing what we need for measurable statistical data. So we have presented that as something that is absolutely unique, to know what is coming from the land and going into the lagoon. That's where the city comes in, is allowing access to those sites. And for the life of me, I cannot find any particular reason why we would be rejected from doing so. The second part is something that the city is not involved in, even though they ask questions about it, is that we are going to partner with Eastern Florida State College through your colleague Jim Yount, and utilize a piece of instrumentation that's sitting there with no use whatsoever right now. It needs to be updated a little bit, but it's a state-of-the-art gas chromatograph mass spectrometer which can measure complex organic compounds, because it has been asked, it has been pleaded for by the MRC and others to find out what is actually going into the IRL from the land. And this would include all kinds of lawn chemicals and things, herbicides, pesticides, certain aspects of fertilizers and other chemicals and compounds, including some things that could be measured for other purposes like PFAS and other types of potential contaminants from different areas. These are things that people have begged for. These are things that have been called for, and nobody is doing it. So one of the questions referred, well, isn't that, why isn't somebody else doing it? Well, other people are involved in a lot of things already. There's a lot of inertia. So we are actually answering a call that hopefully, will be appreciated by all those different parties out there that have been asking for exactly what we want to be doing. So two different parts: using the mass spectrometer with hand samples to look at organic molecules, chemicals, and we probably do that once a week on various sites. Perhaps the same sites where we have the remote sensors, so we have data from the same places, which would be very, very good. Because I didn't feel like I was being very well appreciated by the city, I went to the county and asked the county if they would help out on this. And they were responsive and for the most part cooperative. Matter of fact, they sent me to the DEP, Florida DEP, with looking to them for what has been done. So I went to the font of all knowledge, the state of Florida, who collects all the data on monitoring. And that is how we found out that there's nothing being done, period. It just isn't. So we will be fulfilling something that needs to be done. We'll be doing something that has incredibly small potential for any kind of hazards. We'd be doing something that won't cost anybody any money. We'd be doing something that I think potentially will bring a lot of positive publicity to Titusville, something we should be proud of, that other people, even south of us, some of the big folks down there that aren't even doing it yet. And it's going to happen. That's the other thing that I've been told by several people. This is going to happen eventually. And it would give us a chance to start to make it something part of our community, something very inexpensive, and also even add the component of educational benefit to our teachers and our students who could become involved. And that's sort of where it lies right now.
What will we use the data for?
We're not using the data. We're collecting the data. We can interpret the data for looking for correlations. The data will be available to anybody and everybody. It will be available to governments. It will be available to schools academically. So what it's used for is not our problem.
But how do you anticipate it being used?
Oh, well, I can tell you right now, people are going to, the evaluation of the health of the lagoon is at stake. And if they find issues with that, they're going to say, here's one of the contributions. The sideline on this from the MRC is that they recognize that even in places where it had gotten lower numbers of nutrients in coming into the lagoon, that they were still finding seagrass dying. And this was the previous director of the MRC. She basically said, it looks to us like there could be other things causing problems, other things that are killing the vegetation, but nobody knows. Nobody is testing. And she begged that others would do that. One of my questions was, she had mentioned $1,000 per sample to run through the, for the analyses. Not if you're doing it yourself at an institution. Not if you have your own supplies and you've got your own people. It would be way, way less expensive than that.
I do. Yes, it'd be a lot less expensive if you do it yourself. I used to run an environmental lab. I did for the city but before that we had worked at a contract lab at what used to be BCC, which is now the community colleges. That's the old name.
Right.
Direct support lab for them. And we did work for, this is decades ago, but it's the last time that I remember any testing being done. We collected samples for UF for the St. John's Water Management District.
Right.
And that's the last time. That's like in the 90s. Right. So, but I know that data's there to make a comparison. So you're going to be doing like rain events?
Oh, well, the continuous monitoring is going to cover all of that. We'll know, when there's a storm. We'll be able to, graph all kinds of correlations between influxes of rain or dry periods.
So you're gonna have rain monitoring as well as?
Well, we've got that, I think, locally anyway. I think we've got, we don't necessarily have to have our own rain gauges. I mean, somebody's got them around here, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
If not, rain gauges are very simple to have.
So they're cheap as heck.
Right, and I can mention to Jim, why don't you guys put a little weather station over on top of your building over there somewhere, And that's a great thing for students to be involved in. So yeah, we can make all of these correlations, the kind of things that people who are very astute technically will ask, yeah, but how about that? And say, well, here's how we've got it covered. We've got enough people right now involved in this thing, people with, highly degreed with a lot of experience. We're good. And so if anybody questions our capabilities, our competence in this whole thing, I think we're ready to respond. We've got CVs we can show them.
I'm just wondering what other questions Brad has that need to be addressed.
Yeah, we mentioned a few of them, but what else, if there's other things in there that I could elucidate on a little bit further?
You said you spoke with the county. What was their response? Are they going to allow you to do the same?
If a county has an administered site, we have access. I've gotten that word from the head of their stormwater program. That's from Bach McClure, that's correct. And the head of their environmental program is Terry Williamson, who's also very supportive. He's the one that helped turn me on to the DEP as well.
Aren't they the ones that we met with last
Yes.
year when we were doing the NSF grant?
That's right. Mike and I met with them, and they are, again, very supportive.
Yes.
Did the county, you say that they approved your ability to do the same thing on some of their stormwater inlets? Or outfalls, rather. Did they ask for any kind of documentation forms, any kind of release forms, anything like that?
Well, we've never gotten to that point, and I'm sure that under some circumstances, when you're dealing with certain types of property, you're going to have release forms. And we expect that. I mean, I'm used to it. I've done it before for all kinds of things as a geologist. And so, with your reputation involved, we're not doing anything that's involving somebody else's money or anything like that other than the grant. And therefore, I don't have to be a registered professional geologist for this. I've looked into that as well.
Sir, you said that we were the only one that's not cooperating. You said the other communities are cooperating in the same program you're trying to do?
No, we're not involved with other communities. One question is, why here? Well, I live here. And I also mentioned that, making this connection with Eastern Florida there with their instrument, how many places are gonna have this wonderful instrument sitting there waiting for our use? And with, you know, a professor like Jim and a school teacher over at Astronaut High School like Peter Gay, who's just excited about having students involved. We've got a lot of community interest and involvement in this.
Just to clarify though, what you said earlier tonight was that we're the only community not cooperating.
We are the only entity that we've been involved in, and particularly because we need permission, that is not enthusiastic about it. Let's put it that way to sound a little more positive.
Okay, so you don't have any kind of agreement or anything like that? So
No, we haven't done that yet. That is correct. I have to get this, I have to submit the grant, excuse me, but I have to submit the grant. I want to do it as soon as I can because I'd like to start in the fall, particularly when students and teachers come back again. So looking at a fall deadline, but I want to submit the grant as soon as I can so that our granting foundation can look at that and let us know what the timeline is like. I do have an in with this granting organization. It's a small private foundation. We're asking for about $30,000, which is peanuts, as you might know. Every time I mention this to people in other agencies, they think, well, this is something that these guys ought to be involved. These guys say, well, I hope we start drawing matching funds or other funds, particularly since we'll have the money to get it going. But after the first year, that $30,000 isn't going to be able to get it. But important aspect for this is what we call proof of concept, that we're going to do something that's going to show people almost immediately when we start collecting data that we're doing something extremely valuable. And other people, other organizations will want to be able to be involved. So I think we're going to gain partners.
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
it
please
sounds
go
like
ahead.
then the grant you're talking about is contingent upon some kind of partnership?
The grant I'm talking about is contingent upon me putting a proposal together and sending it to them. As I mentioned, and I can be blunt about this, we could do it without the city. We could make this thing work somehow without Titusville, which I think would be an incredible outrage. I really do. It would be sad. It would be a very sad, and it would be publicized.
Well, especially the way you were talking about integrating with the students in the high school and the local community college, having the city work together for a common goal for the future of the citizen.
Well, if the city can't come up with a good reason or reasons why we can't do this, I think the burden is on the city and not the burden on us, because I've answered the questions and we can show what we can do. So I think, again, if we don't have the city behind us, county will be involved. We can do the work with the mass spectrometer over at the college without the city. It has nothing to do with the city whatsoever. We can get those samples of complex organic molecules and analyze that without the city. But we would really love to have the cooperation, the partnership with the city in doing something that's going to be progressive, pro-health, you know, in terms of human beings as well as the rest of the environment. And I don't see why there should be opposition to this. I really don't.
PR thing for the city.
What's that?
It's a positive PR thing.
Oh, absolutely. Unless there's something else involved that I don't want to be cynical about it. I start out that way because of the way I was treated initially, and I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But to find out that that the government is in opposition for some reason that may not turn out to be very rational, at least, or even honest. I don't know. I don't want to mess that up. I came here the first time when we had this proposal through the NSF, wanting to be very positive about a relationship. And that's when I got shot down.
Yeah. And we were so positive that we were encouraging you to go right up to council.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think, we can have a new day.
Yeah.
Okay? Do you foresee asking other communities, or do you think they'll I mean, I realize Titusville's the first of them. Do you foresee asking others? Or do you think they'll be coming to you, or Marcy will decide to expand?
Yes, I think the thing can become viral, because what we're doing, I just recently joined up with the IRL roundtable through Mike, and through the other organizations, the many organizations that are working with the lagoon, the many other organizations like Sierra Club and Audubon and everybody else that care about the environment, and even the fisheries people through Laura Lee. These are people who are going to see what we're doing and hope that they can expand it. We're in a strategic position here in the northern part of the lagoon because of the degradation up here that's stronger than anywhere else, worse than anywhere else. Right. And we've also been, as I mentioned in there, one of those parts, as it turns out, of the county that seems to be sort of the poorer stepchild. You know, the other guys down south of us get all the attention and the benefits. Poor old Titusville sits up here, even though we've got the space thing going on, we're still looked at as backwater, literally. And I think this would put us well on the map. And I have a feeling that there'll be others who will want to do it too. The county itself might actually start to expand this project if it turns out right.
I have a question for you. Proof of concept. Are you going to go from city limit to city limit? What is the scope?
I started out initially with this project thinking, again, in terms of science, how many outfall sites would we sponsor? And then thinking about the amount of money and so on. Started with as many as a dozen. That would be fabulous. But you know, for proof of concept, we really only need one.
True.
But we want to have a minimum of 3. And I have a couple of targets in mind already. One in particular, I think, that relates more to the county, so it would be fairly safe. But I'd say a minimum of 3, 5 would be dandy. We'll have enough money, because I have to reallocate our budget for this whole thing, between those sensor sites and how much that's going to cost for installation. And the actual sensor arrays themselves are really not very expensive at all. And then the amount of money to get the mass spectrometer up and running with everything else, bringing in people from the company for probably $5,000 of that 30, which would be adequate to get an expert from the company to come in and train everybody, get things going, and buy a lot of supplies. So I think our little bitty $30,000 will actually be adequate to get us started if we can move it.
Understand what I'm thinking of is in your scope of work. I'm sure the city will want to know, am I more in the north than the south,
Yeah.
in the middle? You know, because the population distribution is not even.
Right. That's a good question.
So therefore, the contribution
Right.
from the population.
That's right.
Will be different.
That's right.
Okay, so.
Right. I think for a comprehensive study, we would really want to spread those out well. And we also have the acknowledgement that these outflows are draining certain areas. What are those areas? Are those areas with a lot of lawns? Are those areas that are mostly sort of rural and back? And that will make a difference.
My point is, yeah.
And so we'd have to do a survey of understanding. We don't have really excellent ideas of we can't put the drainage into a drainage basin model because there's too many unknowns, especially in flat land like this. And separating out the contribution that's coming through the groundwater, the aquifer versus the surface water. There's a lot of complexities, but the raw data itself will be incredibly valuable.
Right, because when I looked into it, and I was looking for data, the BAM, I think it is, one of the maps, the only measurement that the state takes is at the Addison Canal.
And that's a place where we want to be. The Addison Canal is not currently, nothing's actually being analyzed there now. And I understand at the end of the Addison Canal, that's basically a county/private administration area.
And so, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we do the Addison Canal would be
a choice of north to south.
Right.
Or in the middle. That's
right.
And it was just,
well,
as a project, my project management came up.
Yes. Laura Lee had made some important recommendations. Again, we'd have to get the city to okay those. Obviously, up around Sand Point would be very important.
Absolutely.
She mentioned the outfall at St. John Street, I believe it is, as one that really bothers her, because she looks and she sees a lot of things there that don't look like they should be in the water. I don't know. But you know, if we could get this okay, then we can go start. We're going to have to look at each place as an individual case of how we do the installations. It's not one size fits all.
And I understand, but I think for fairness to the city.
Yeah.
People would like to know.
Oh, yeah.
Where
Yeah.
and how many.
Well, if the city got involved, I'd recommend that we do again, probably 5 would be pretty reasonable. A couple in the south, a couple further north, and maybe one in the middle.
That might be something for the project to consider.
That's right.
To go to city council and say, we're thinking about 5 places.
That's right. That's right.
And
if that question comes up, that's probably what I would tell them.
because I think they would like to know. And so.
I'd love to get input from the city, you
For
know?
proof of concept, I think something that staff.
Yeah, yeah.
Can write down and say, listen, now, we're looking at maybe possible 5.
That's right.
We're not looking at 10,000 areas, which you would love to do.
Well, 5 would be great if we do the continuous surveying at those 5. It would give us great data. When you've got nothing, and statistically, when you've got 5, you are really doing pretty well. Laura Lee had actually mentioned in part of our budget actually had a major planning meeting, a day-long meeting for all the different parties to get together on planning the details. But we're not gonna do any of that until we get funding.
I understand, but when you go to council, I think the picture needs to be painted.
Yeah.
That says, we're looking at 5, we're looking at 10, we're looking
Right.
at whatever, so that there's a mind picture
Yeah,
of what is going on.
right.
And the reasons of why.
That's right.
Okay, and like I said, to me, there's a Roosevelt Bar, there's a Little River, Titusville.
Yeah.
And south.
Right.
And so I think that the contributors are different, the effluent is gonna be different.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is the kind of thinking picture that I think needs to be painted.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the things we have to realize and work on is to try to dispel any fear that this is gonna be used as a bludgeon for the city. You know, that this is gonna cost the city anything. Again, I think ultimately it's gonna be positive for the city, it's not gonna be negative. But, you know, for the data, therefore, it's not like citizens are gonna come and say, ooh, what did it look like for my outflow in my area? That's probably not the kind, we're gonna have to filter that and interpret that carefully, scientifically, to learn what's going on. And then eventually, some point, there will be more public news outlets or whatever that can say, here, now we know more, here's what's going on, you know? And that, you ultimately can't be afraid of that, especially when you have this serious health problem in the lagoon. It's gotta be done, and like I said, it's gonna be done. Somebody is gonna do this at some point. It's kind of like somebody could tell you, well, you can either do it now, do it yourself and do it right, or it's gonna be done to you by somebody. And I kind of like our plan. I think small is beautiful, and yet it should be effective.
And that's my point. Being proactive should not be for them.
Yeah.
Okay, but it needs to be understood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm
And that's a handshake.
very happy.
That goes with it.
Right.
Okay, and that will be, having had to do that for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
It took a while because I'm hard-headed, so.
Right.
I recommend that you think it through and provide a picture to council. So perhaps, I don't want to use the word fear, but the unknown.
Yeah.
Somewhat dispel. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have another question?
Sure.
And the email that you initially received in May from you said, a particular operation lab will determine lawn chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, petroleum distillates, what concentration are in the lagoon. So I'm just curious, what's the time frame for this? It seems very broad what you're looking for, and again, how would this?
Yeah.
What's the ultimate outcome? Is this going to be a report that you're trying to do? Because initially I heard that it's going to be more or less, we're just going to be collecting data for anybody to use.
No, the data has to be correlated, statistically looked at carefully, and then interpreted. There would be public reports about the data. There would also potentially be academic reports, because this is going to be academically very interesting to people. A lot of the folks that are out there fiddling around with the lagoon right now would be jealous. They should be. So the reports will be done by us. The time scale is, right now, it's 1 year. 1 year of collecting data. Once we get it started, we will have a tremendous amount, particularly if we're collecting the organic molecule data once a week for 52 weeks worth of, say 3 to 5 different localities. That's a lot of wonderful data.
I remember talking with Dr. Gary Zarillo at FIT, he's been doing and leading the charge on the saltwater inflow studies out at the port.
Right.
I believe that's being handed over to UCF this year. But one of the things that really shocked me about all of the models they're using for the lagoon is they don't include any stormwater in the calculations of what's going into the lagoon. And for a city that gets 52 inches of rain a year, that's a lot of stormwater that's being generated. And so what Gary told me a couple years ago, well, last year certainly, he said if we had an understanding of how much volume of stormwater is actually coming in from the coast, then we can actually include that in our models. So that our models of salinity, our models of flow,
yes,
which right now seem to indicate there's no flow in our area of the lagoon, that it's more like a bathtub, everything goes in and stays in. But the thing that amazed me was that we looked at hundreds and hundreds of sensors mounted throughout the Indian River, and not a single one of them was anywhere near an outflow. And that was done intentionally. It was done intentionally to look at ambient water quality and not be influenced by what's coming in from the stormwater. Well, it's exactly that we want to start measuring. We want to know what's in the stormwater. Gary said if we could calculate volume from an outfall, like where we have a point source outfall, and we know the amount of rain that we've had, we can back calculate a sheet flow calculation for how much is coming in around the storm flow, and we can use that to extrapolate water flow of fresh water into a saline estuary and actually tell whether or not we're at a problematic area.
Yeah.
We've never looked at fresh water being poisonous in an estuary, but it is.
Yes.
An estuary needs a certain amount of salinity, and if our 54 inches of rainwater every year are contributing to the drop in the salinity, which causes, shellfish to die because they can't get enough salt water, or the eggs of my favorite, the spotted sea trout, needs 22 parts per thousand for their eggs to float so they can spawn. Laura Lee told me that what they're seeing is a die-off in their catch of snapper, which has never happened. I mean, there's almost always snapper. But they're starting to die off, and the fishermen are starting to talk like, well, maybe it's just a 10-year cycle. They'll come back. But there's no fry. There's no seagrass for them to hide in, So salinity has got to be one of the things that we measure, and volume, so that we know how much volume.
Yeah.
So there are some fundamental things that we need to know about what we're producing from the land. And once we can start getting a handle on what's in it, we can figure out what to do about how to deal with it. But we gotta know first, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great to have, what you want to do, it depends on what kind of detailed modeling you're talking about. You can do guesstimation, order of magnitude type of modeling, which might be okay in some cases. But if you have 5 outflow sites and you're looking at those, but then you've got, Jim Young has this map with 18 Titusville outflow sites on it.
And there's 1,800 in the county.
And there's way more than that, that's right. But just for our area, which we could model basically especially since there's not much circulation or movement, we could model our area. We'd need more, obviously flow meters we had talked about before too. And doing flow meters is not hard, but you have to have those installed properly. They have to be at the outflow site, and we'd have to get permission to station those in the outflow. And We would ask.
Okay, Brad, more questions?
I think I have enough. We'll take this information and see how we can bring this before City Council.
I appreciate it, I really do. And again, open to clarification or other questions that come up. I mean, already got a couple of them today that we didn't have before, so that's good.
Would it make sense, Brad, to ask Dr. Greenberg to have a small presentation ready on what he wants to see this proposal? Maybe having the Department of Ethics can make it very clear.
This will go before City Council. I mean, I'll have to see how we can do this, bring it before them, but it'll be up to City Council how they want to receive the information.
Okay. Laura Lee told me, because she knows that emotionally I'm not real happy about the way I was treated. And I would make a very poor lawyer because I couldn't deal with some of that, the tension involved. But she said that she would represent this to the City Council. She would be the key person to do that. And I think, I respect her immensely that she could probably do that. And she'll know everything that we know at some point here, because she has basically made herself a partner in this project. Not that she doesn't have enough other things to take care of her time.
I just want to point out though, I'm looking at the tracking sheet, August 10th, last year, there was a motion recommending that the city's water facility run tests on samples that TEC members collect and bring to them for testing. Testing should be on nutrients, oils, grease, and that was approved with a voice vote, sent to City Council, and they did not approve that recommendation. So this is something similar has already been brought before them. And then as Dr. Greenberg has already mentioned, he's already gone before City Council. So I just want you to understand, this is a repeat question.
It's not really a repeat question because I proposed that way back then, and the response at that time had been that this city could not afford to dedicate their lab personnel to running these tests, and unless we had some way of running the tests ourselves, the answer was no, because we couldn't use the city lab. That's what that was about.
I'm not sure that's the sole answer, man.
That was what we were told.
Well, and I have to be emphatic about my encounters with the City Council. I got my 3 minutes. Actually, one was probably less than that. The city manager interrupted me and said, "The city's not interested in this." Whoa. Oh, he did. That's exactly what he said. And I said, "Do you know that?" You know, I'm naively, I'm looking at him and going, "How do you know that?" You know, didn't say anything else. He just left it at that. And when I brought this up, the mayor actually the first time was fairly, cordial. Second time he wasn't at all. He looks over at the city manager and the lawyer. It wasn't for City Council, at least for these guys to tell you what's going on. So this is the taste in the mouth that I have in dealing with City Council. They have not dealt with this in any detail. They've never gotten the materials in any detail. So if anybody says that, they're not being honest, Mr. Parrish. They're not. It has not come to the city.
We will see what we can bring before the City Council.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wow.
Any other discussion on this before we move on? Okay, we're down to the discussion of future agenda items.
No reports.
Didn't Tom have something?
I think Tom did.
This is an opportunity for staff members, commissioners to bring up your reports too, still under reports. Unless you are going to just the next agenda item.
But I think what
You want to do individual reports first, is that what you're saying?
It's an opportunity.
Wasn't that what you proposed that Tom's idea was
Was a future agenda item.
that it would be in the report and then become a future agenda item? That's what I think I
Yes.
heard him say.
Either that or he can make a report and make a motion and his report and move it to the next meeting.
Right.
Well, maybe you can tell me what I'm doing, but simply, I just wanted to see if I could entertain a motion for the commission. And the motion would be, again, going back to the last January, since that was kind of fizzled out, to have TEC have a live stream and video recording equivalent to all other commissions. permissions presently that follow the Robert's Rules of Order and allow members who are on leave, with permission from City Council, to dial in via Zoom.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion?
I think it's a great idea.
Tom, the only question I have is the city ready to do that? Who else uses Zoom in the city to do anything?
I think that's something that they need to figure out, but based on what I've heard, this is something that they're already entertaining, okay? So I'm just trying to, take advantage of the situation. I mean, we should be doing that. Everybody else does that.
I understand the rest of the
Okay.
world does.
And I don't care about whether or not I want to put it forward, I want to push it forward,
Okay.
okay? Because they're deciding, not me.
Where I'm coming from is just information,
Yeah,
that's all. Whether we're pushing new stuff onto the city or we're just not being used by other means that the other people in the city are using. Because if the city's using Zoom to do something else, then there's very little room to say no.
I
Now,
can't
if the
imagine
city says,
anybody.
I don't use Zoom at
Yeah.
all, then that's a different conversation with staff and everybody else, because they may not have the resources, that's where I'm coming from.
The resources exist, they're all around us. Okay, all you have to do is dial in to Zoom.
I hate to do it, these things don't work.
Well, right now, you're not helping the discussion here, okay? I have a motion on the table, let's have some real,
And I'm not disagreeing with you, Pat.
okay, all right.
Did you get a second?
Yes.
Okay, then discussion is.
Discussion.
Yes.
Does the city do Zoom for meetings?
No,
Does it
The
do any
council
other
doesn't, do they
kind?
do Zoom for anything?
no.
Is
Well,
there
we do
any-
Zoom in our staff, with meetings with consultants or with anybody else, but we don't have sunshine meetings in Zoom, using Zoom, no.
Oh, so the staff does Zoom for, like, the people you just had here, or other groups that you're working with?
In an office environment, yes. we
In
do
an
that.
office environment, you do Zoom?
Yeah,
Okay.
but as a collective, decision-making body, we don't have that availability.
Brad, you just raised sunshine, how would that be a problem if we had a meeting where the public is here and they Zoom in order to take the meeting in, and when there's petitions and requests, they can, we can actually acknowledge, is there anybody out there that wants to do this? So how would that be different?
So, during our experience during the pandemic, we offered that, but we still had to have 4 actual human bodies in the room
Oh, yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
So not everybody was able to utilize that option.
Mhm.
We also had to have extra staff handle the technicalities of that as well. We also took longer on the meetings because each time a piece of information was distributed to the members, we then had to break the meeting, take that piece of information, scan it, then email it to the members who were participating via Zoom, which took some time. Then come back, then open up the meeting to have a discussion each time things would happen.
Well, fortunately, things don't have to work that way anymore.
Right.
Okay, all this stuff can be available in a snap. No scanning needs to be done. People have their computers. Documents are quickly, available visually. So I think we are at a point where we need to move on and, for our city, for our government, so that we are more democratic.
Okay. Any other comment? Then, Lori, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Cards, hold on, speakers.
Do we have cards on there?
Uh-huh. I have a card in that says for any item that's being voted on. Yeah.
I didn't know we could do that.
Mr. Johnson is the one who does this regularly. He puts in a card for any new items that are being voted on. And it's a great thing to do, because it makes sure that, someone who wants to have the opportunity to speak can. So Kristen Martique with from Coco, and I won't take up the whole time, but I would like to strongly support your motion, Mr. Paris. And if I understand it correctly, you are proposing that the TEC meetings be live streamed, that there can be remote attendance by board members, and that the public could participate remotely. And if I hear that correct, there's 3 individual components, and as you stated, City Council can decide, right? You're putting forward your best foot forward, and they can decide what they are willing to do. And I'd like to share with everyone that currently, the only city in Brevard County that provides remote public participation is Cape Canaveral. Cape Canaveral. And I have personally validated this. I have personally spoken with them from my living room. They do not have the video that is alive. They use a program. It might be a Teams stuff. So it's a Teams program. And it's even better than actually having it so that you're looking into someone's living room, because I can participate via audio, but I can see all the video. And wow, right? For your comment earlier about people with disabilities, transportation issues, people that can't make it to the meeting. I mean, you are really talking about propelling Titusville forward via technology. So I want to commend you for this, and I support this vote, as you know, wholeheartedly. I petitioned. I hope it gets recorded accurately. And if those are the 3 components, I'm a strong, strong supporter of all of them. And I hope that you will all vote for this, and that the staff will put it forward to City Council. Thank you.
All right. I guess we're back for a roll call vote, unless there's any other comments. Tom?
Oh, I thought we were ready for a vote.
Before you make your vote, I just want to point out that on your semi-annual report, this was given to City Council, and it says that the commission requested the commission meetings be live broadcast. It was given to City Council last night's meeting. They accepted the report, didn't make any action on that particular request. There was also some discussion, which I sent into the email to you, from the City Council special meeting on March 7th. And this discussed, and we're talking about the budget, goals, strategies, about offering live stream meetings, and whether they would possibly look at which meetings are live streams, which ones don't necessarily need to be live streamed, and maybe not have that meeting live streamed and then offer a different meeting to be live streamed. That way they're not creating new resources or having to allocate new resources for this. So that's something that was discussed in those minutes. I just want to throw that out there, that council is aware of your request. You've made this request several times to them. They discussed it during their budget meeting. I'm sure they'll probably bring it up again during the budget meetings that are going to be scheduled later this summer. But if you want to make this, go forward with this motion, we'll do our best to bring it before City Council.
I think this motion is a little bit different, Brad, and then it also goes beyond just having them video, and there's interactivity here.
True.
And if
it still requires staff resources.
Understood. There's a budget involved, and the mayor told me that they're already looking at doing that in the budget. So here's clarification on exactly what we're talking about, not just the video streaming, but also the ability to Zoom members in when we're on TDY with permission from council, for example. Those things should also happen. And I think the idea of having the citizens be able to connect in with questions or queries when it's time, I think that's a wonderful way of educating the population and meets several of our other goals. So I'm certainly supporting this, and I don't see this as the same thing that you talked about at City Council last night. It's more.
It's similar. That's where I know each one of these recommendations.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So let's have it. Please.
I just want to clarify that his motion was not what she said. So if you want to restate your motion.
Wow, that was a long worded, okay. Okay, the motion is, that TEC should have a live stream and video recording. That's equivalent to what all other commissions at least receive, okay, that follow the Robert's Rules of Order. and allow members, who are on leave with permission from city council to dial in, via Zoom. In addition, I guess I should add that members of the public should be able to engage the city, through the same mechanism, okay?
Second hold.
Second.
Clear? All right, okay, all right. Well, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Member Perez,
Yes?
Vice Chairman Majak,
Yes.
Member Delgado,
Yes.
Member Fliss,
Yes.
Member Young.
Yes.
Okay. Continuing, anybody else have a report? Okay, moving on to discussion of future agenda items. What would we like to have on our future agenda? Which I won't be here for.
Have some things already, sort of piling up on the agendas, Brad?
The only thing we have on your agenda next meeting is the minutes that you tabled earlier this evening.
Starting from scratch, what would you like to do?
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's late. Probably need a motion to
Let's see,
extend the
one
minutes
thing
before
is,
you-
well, here's an agenda item. I'd like to see TEC review its bylaws and charter and metrics to monitor what is going on, in the city.
Is that two items or one?
I guess
Sounded like-
charter is one.
It sounded like two, yeah, charter would be one, charter and bylaws,
Yeah, and metrics would be another one,
back to metrics.
to monitor, what the city's doing and how our input can be, better served.
Okay, second.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? Well, it seems pretty straightforward, so we just vote on it? Do we need a roll call or is just a?
It could be,
I didn't think we
Just
needed
a
a
general-
motion for this.
No?
it could be a voice vote
Okay,
to establish, so that everybody's,
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. That'll be a good one to review.
Do we still need 5 minutes?
5 minutes?
That what you said?
I know, I was gonna say, we probably needed to have extended the meeting for 45 minutes just to bring it up to where we are now. But we're a little bit longer.
Do we need, well, actually,
Do you have another one you wanna bring up?
no, I was just wondering, Jeff went through all this effort. I was wondering if we should have made a motion to recommend, but.
I think we already did, and staff is in the process of
Okay.
working that, so I think we're good in that.
I think so.
Okay, no other reports, no other,
Or should we ask Brad?
Yeah.
to agree with that?
Mhm.
what, I'm sorry, what was the question?
ask?
Do we need to make a motion about something with with Dr. Greenberg? Or are we okay with that?
No, that was just an opportunity for me to clarify the motion that you made in the last meeting.
Okay.
So I can be better prepared to answer questions. I do want to mention that on the tracking sheet, there are other items which are still supposed to be brought back to you. One in particular is the canopy, tree, or urban forest concept plan that you came up with, and the recommendations you made to the city's tree canopy analysis. So we have been evaluating that. I've had several staff members working on this to see how we can evaluate this based on city council's recommendation or direction to staff to come back to them with costs and impacts, resources that would be necessary to help address some of the requests that were made by the commission to the city council. So if I have an opportunity, I'll see if I can bring these back to you to see what you think. That really clarifies what you were asking for, or what you had originally asked the city council. So if there's an opportunity for you to do that, I'll definitely bring it back.
Oh, good.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, do you have one question? question, okay, underdog of it.
Brett, please, how many open items are there on the list? Because I looked at it and I'm not so sure I understand what's open and, you know, what and where, and is there a rebound? Is there a bounce off? Where's the scorecard?
So as far as I see, there is the item we talked about tonight, that we're gonna see if we can bring this back to city council. It looks like there's several other items too you've already asked us, that's in addition to what I see here on this tracking sheet. I've already mentioned the recommendations you made regarding your urban forestry plan and to the recommendations to the city's tree canopy study. It looks like that's it.
Wow.
I'll still entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?